This is episode 1154.
The storytelling side is so important because at some point we're going to have to go to the board and say, we need 20 more account executives next year. And they're going to say, why? And that if it's just you respond with, well, we need sales capacity, that's not the answer. The answer is we want to grow our enterprise business. And to really do that, we're going to have ramp times. We're going to meet them with this amount of demand. We're going to think about the business and where those teams need to go. We have this many accounts that they can go work. If you're not able to do all of that, you've really lost the narrative with the company. And look, I think good FP&A teams can do that. I think I have one of those teams right now. I think we've got one of the better FP&A teams in SaaS software and software in general.
There's a moment in every company's life when finance stops being about tracking performance and starts shaping belief. Today's conversation lives right in that moment. We're talking about what happens when planning actually works and how that discipline changes morale, momentum, and of course, decision-making across the organization. We'll explore why storytelling has become one of CFO Drew Laxton's most powerful tools, how AI is shifting from assistive to agentic, to truly agentic, and why FP&A may be the quiet force that begins energizing the entire company. Our talk with CFO Drew Laxton begins after this.
Why are finance teams struggling right now? It's not a lack of skill, it's a lack of time. Even the most talented finance pro has twice as much work as they can handle, if not more. Automation with AI is critical just to survive, let alone reach peak performance. But you don't want just any AI solution. You want one built with finance users in mind. This is where Planful comes in. It's a platform that transforms how you plan, budget, forecast, and more. And with Planful AI, you can transform how you work without sacrificing control. Use Planful AI to streamline workflows, detect anomalies, plan with precision, and get more done. Everything Planful AI assists you with is fully auditable and secure, so you can reduce your manual work and stay proactive, agile, and confident in every decision. Your finance team deserves to be elevated above the repetitive tasks. The best part is, you can get started right away. See Planful AI in action and start elevating your team today.
Hello and welcome. Drew Laxton is with us. Drew is CFO of Outreach today. Hey, Drew, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for making time for us this afternoon. As you might know, we always begin by asking you to take a look back for us and try to identify some of those experiences you feel really prepared you for the finance leadership role. What would you share with us?
Yeah, I have a pretty classic finance background. I started my career in banking. I did the analyst years, associate years, and that led into a corporate career. And when I look back and reflect on my career, the things that I picked up early on were just remaining curious about businesses and understanding as how the little pieces work. I think the best people that I have worked with in the past and that work for me now really understand the business and not just necessarily the accounting or the IT or the finance. Like, they get the core of it. And that comes from curiosity. You have to be interested in how a marketing team works to be able to enjoy that. And the other thing that I think about a lot, and I got this from starting as an investment banker, is there's stories to tell. And finance can be a lot of numbers and a lot of just drudgery, but if you can't tell the story, it just stays there. And that's something that's just, it's the nature of banking. You're trying to make sure that there's a cohesive story people can hold on to, because that's the thing that they can actually retain. And whether that is, a small acquisition or something big like an IPO, like that, it's such a core part of it. And it held with me to this day. my poor team has to hear that from me so regularly as we're going into a board meeting on what's the story for the quarter? What's the story for next quarter? We just finished our planning. We're a January year-end company, so we just finished FY27 planning, and it just comes back to what are the core tenets and how do we tell that story? And I think that's a place where I've been able to differentiate myself through the years.
Again, you mentioned you began investment banking. At some point, you jump over to become an operator. What was it? And we call it the operator's itch. You had something you just had to get inside a business to really understand it. What was it? What made you take that leap?
Yeah, I always enjoyed working with the operators that I got to work with during my banking career. I found the way they thought about the business was clearly different. You go through these phases of as a banker of, oh, we're smarter than the operators, and you realize how smart the operators are and like how they know their business inside and out. And banking slowly changes from being this analysis-driven career to being kind of sales-driven, right? You have to go develop business and figure out what the next opportunity is going to be for the bank. And I think that's the point when I realized I wanted something more corporate. And full disclosure, I'm the son of a CFO also, so I saw his life growing up. So, it wasn't that foreign to me what the life was going to be like. But I have a funny transition. I was an oil and gas investment banker, and I transitioned to tech when I moved out to Seattle for family reasons. And that was a weird transition to go from being an oil and gas banker. You think you're going to end up being an oil and gas CFO. A lot of my colleagues were, to being a tech CFO. If you had told, MBA school Drew that I would be a startup CFO or early stage company CFO in tech companies, I would have called you a liar. But I wanted to stay on that analysis track. Like, I like that side of the business and the operating a business. And so as I came into Aptio, as I got out of client services, that's where I was. Like, we were on a path to become a public company and needed somebody who just had that core skill set of understanding the business and just broadly understanding the business, not necessarily the core, the smaller pieces that an FP&A team might cut the business into. So I came in on the finance team, ultimately ran investor relations there, and that was just a perfect fit for me. Continued to love the finance exposure, and that's, the rest is history.
You already got storytelling, it seems to me. As a banker sitting across from C-suite executives, you had heard the stories told and polished. So when you arrived there, investor relations responsibilities, yeah, this was something you understood thoroughly, or was it different? What? It
is slightly different, right? In that you're talking to a multitude of investors, especially as we got public, right? The initial part of going public, you set the story. It feels very much like investment banking at that time. But when you get into actual investor relations, the questions get harder. I mean, just that it can't describe it any other way. And so you have to learn how to pull that back to what the overall story is. And there's just this weave of making sure you're supporting that with the numbers as well. You can't have something that drastically diverges from what the actual financial filings and projections show as. And so you just refine that over time. I will say, as running investor relations, you realize just how many pockets of money are out there investing. It's wild, and that it's wildly different opinions. The larger funds, you kind of know where they're going to go, but these smaller funds, smaller hedge funds, the long short teams, like, it's hard, and it really makes you have to think critically about the business.
I noticed a title on your resume as well. At Aptio, you were also a chief of staff, and that's a title we've seen on quite a few CFOs' resumes. But it doesn't, what does it mean exactly? And it just puts you sort of right at the center of things. I would imagine all the functional heads, what have you. You're really understanding the organization. I don't know. I'm taking a guess. What does it mean to you?
No, without a doubt. It's funny we talk about that around outreach even now. Yeah, so that coincided with Apptio being taken private by Vista. And
Oh.
Vista wants all of their CEOs to have a chief of staff or some sort of project manager there. And honestly, it was very much a step outside of my comfort zone, which I was looking for at that point in my career. Get a little closer to the CEO's day to day, understand how the business operates. And I viewed it as the don't let the CEO run into a locked door. Like, how can I be out in front of the things that he is working on and anticipate where I can be helpful? As people started to trust me around the company, if a proposal or a project was going to come to the CEO's desk, I took the first pass at the proposal. I started to learn how to ask questions that I knew the CEO was going to ask and just streamline his day to day. And anybody sitting in my seat knows how busy a CEO's job is and how fast they have to context switch. And to the extent that I could help the CEO at Apptio get through all of that. And then I was also the interaction point with a lot of the day-to-day with Vista, who's very hands-on as most private equity firms are. And so it just took that off of the CEO's desk, and we could escalate when something was critical to have his eyes on.
So tell us what you invested 5 years there. It looks like you enjoyed lots of experience in a number of different areas. Working closely with Vista, I'm sure, was an experience as well. But when you leave, what is it that you're looking for? I've done my 5 years here. I've advanced steadily, but I want another plateau. I want more experience.
Yeah. So, the Apptio story is kind of supports this in a way. As a finance leader, the boxes that you really want to check are: have you ever gotten through an IPO? Have you ever raised money? And have you done M&A? Like, those are the three just kind of, have you done those? Have you seen it type of transactions? I didn't know I'd be so lucky as to do all of that at Apptio, and then took the company private again. So, like, I really saw the full cycle of a company there. But it was really clear to me that the outcome for Apptio wasn't going to be to go back public. And I kind of like that aspect of the job. And so when I got recruited to come to Outreach, that was a lot of the talk. And this is 2020, so it's definitely go-go times of SaaS companies. Everybody's growing fast. Everybody's going public. But I got to also come in as a VP rather than build my way up to being a VP and set the tone of the team that I wanted. So it was a build that had to go on there. And that was really fun for me from a career perspective of how do I as a finance leader envision the perfect finance team? And I was running the BI analytics team as well. What does a centralized analytics team look like? How do you think about that? And so it's a very different path than building your way up to something that already existed and frankly was working really well at Apptio. That's not to say it wasn't working well at Outreach. Outreach was just a lot earlier than Apptio by the time I had taken over as a VP there. So it was just a good fit all around. It was still founder-led as well. And I knew the story. I was lucky to have been in Seattle. And so the other aspect of Outreach that really intrigued me was I got to use the tool. At Apptio, it's an IT financial management tool really designed for enterprise companies. That's just not something that the VP of Finance touches.
Let's ask you about Outreach, and I might have a few more career-related questions for you a little later. But tell us about Outreach. What does this company do, and what are its offerings? Give us some detail.
For sure. So we CFOs are so trainable. I've heard several of your podcasts where everybody uses the party line so well. But we amplify revenue teams is what we always say. But what does that mean? Like, we make AEs better at their job at our core. And what we want to do is use AI agents to improve their day-to-day so that we take away manual tasks and make them better, make them know what the next action should be. Now, if you look at the history of the company, pretty much anybody who is listening to this podcast has been in an outreach sequence. When you get that nice smooth follow-up that happens from a sales rep, you're probably in one of our sequences. But we built out the platform to have a conversational intelligence tool, opportunity management tool, and a forecasting tool. And so you can really run end-to-end the sales process from pipeline development all the way through a closed-won deal on the Outreach platform. Now, about a little over a year ago, we pivoted and started, not really a pivot, but just added on AI agents on top of this, which went GA this year, where we were taking all those manual tasks that we have seen through all the years of data we've accumulated and are automating those. And it is truly agentic, and it's absolutely amazing to watch. It's so fun to get onto a customer call and explain to them that they never interacted with an actual human to book the call. And our agents genuinely work.
So tell us, would you mind, just a history of the capital structure, an abbreviated history?
Yeah, we've been VC back from the get-go and still are to this day. We raised our Series G in 2021. We've raised a little shy of $500 billion in the history of the company. Still have a lot of our investors on our board that are still very supportive of the company. So beyond that, no other capital raises outside of the VC rounds.
Can you, just as a finance person, and again, you were named CFO in February of this past year, 2025. But you actually joined the company way back 2020. Large language models wasn't something being discussed widely. ChatGPT was still, I guess, a year or two away. I forget what the time frame might have been. Clearly, there was some AI capabilities that the company had been investing in. It was a question of timing, perhaps. But also, there are a lot more tools available that, everything's just spiraled. Reflect a little on AI and during the course of your tenure at Outreach.
Yeah, it certainly has become a noisy market. But look, we've had AI in the product before it was called AI. We were the first to understand sentiment in email responses and be able to move things around in sequences based on the responses that came back from a prospect. And so AI has been there a long time. We've had an AI account assist that has been in there basically since you saw the LLMs come out, where you could ask very general questions in natural language. Is this opportunity one that I should pursue? And it's going to go through all of the data and say why and where the reasons are. And so AI has existed for quite a while. The big pivot that I've seen over the last year is the agentic side of it. Actually doing activities, not in this co-pilot stage, but actually augmenting the work so that people can be better at their jobs. And that's really what's the game changer, I think, overall.
How is your finance team actually using AI?
Yeah. Well, we use it on a couple of levels. There's some things that are just improving our day-to-day. We use Copilot like everybody else does. We certainly use our own tool a lot as we think about forecasting. We can do the short-term looks at pipeline via our own tools and use our own AI in understanding what the probability of outcomes are of various deals. We're looking constantly, and let's go do broadly first. We have AI running through a lot of our tool set at this point. You think about the procurement, the legal, I have several technical teams that sit on my team that are using coding tools that are making them much faster and much more efficient. As you think about your Salesforce developers and people like that, the BI team using that to do SQL queries, it just makes everybody move faster. But I will tell you, I've been blown away by some of the finance tools that are coming out. I think about how frequently I'll Slack an FP&A analyst or an accountant of why did this move that direction, or why, what's going on with this specific contract. Well, these tools are going across all of your forecasting and your ERP and your contracts, and can just answer that natural language for you. And that really frees them up to not be responding to the CFO being curious before they jump onto a customer call, but allows them to free up to actually work on things that are really impactful to the business.
Can you say that you've already, there's a measurable impact already? Have you seen so far, whether it's speed, accuracy?
I think
cost
so.
savings?
I think certainly on the speed side is where you see it, and it's kind of the mundane piece of it, but I think it's very useful in that it just speeds up responses, or you can get through a large amount of unstructured data in a very fast way now that wasn't available before the tools. So without a doubt, we're seeing the improvement there. I think we're still early innings of this. And I think the finance organization is going to be one of the last to move on it because of the data security issues that everybody is worried about. It's just harder to test a startup's new AI tool if it's going to suck in all your customer contracts. You have to trust that they're going to do the right things there. So there's a little bit that needs to settle out on the winners there, but I still think there's been a lot of value so far in AI.
Are there a different set of rules when it comes to your AI investments and ROI? Is it a formula that continues to evolve, or you have a running conversation about?
Without a doubt, it's a formula that continues to evolve. There's a lot of the AI tools that we're using that are like we use NetSuite currently for our ERP. I know I get value out of NetSuite. I don't know that I could assign a direct ROI to it. And I feel very similarly about a lot of the products that we're using. We certainly can move faster in development or queries or whatever we're doing specifically with this. But the actual measurable ROI is a little bit harder. That's what's actually fun about the Outreach tool is the ROI is incredibly measurable as customers are using this our AI to prospect. We have a baseline of before and after, and we can see a measurable improvement in the way prospects are coming in or deals are converting. And so it's nice sitting within a tool set that's doing that.
Do you see challenges, or I guess a better word, risks that concern you about adopting AI? What are some of the risks you foresee?
There's the short-term risks of just trusting it a little bit too much. It doesn't take in it doesn't take away the need to still think critically about solving a problem. You can't just trust that what comes out the other end is accurate or the best thought process. The long-term one that I think about a lot is the reason I might know a number has moved is at one point I built models like that, and I had to think through, the marketing funnel, or is my engineering team efficient? And if you take away that learning, or you augment the way people are learning that, how do you ever become me? And I don't want to be a Luddite about this. I appreciate that my tool set is very different than my father's tool set and before him. And we don't all learn the exact same way, but there's something that feels different about this, where it's making inferences for you in a way that you don't have to think as critically if we get to the extent to which this looks like it can go. And I think that's a critical part of learning and learning the business and learning to sit in the seat that I sit in, where I ask these questions because I've been there.
Is Outreach an acquisitive company? Have you done a number of acquisitions over time? And
mostly small acquisitions, and we haven't done one in a while. We did a small acquisition to create the forecasting tool that we have now. We've done a couple of other little smaller acquisitions, more kind of technology or team type acquisitions. We've really built on our platform, and that's been by design. I genuinely believe we've got some of the best technology in the business, and that's because we've built it internally. We've also been able to move faster on a lot of this AI stuff because we've built stuff internally. All the data talks to each other. All the compute layer works really well and is broken apart in a pretty a modern architecture. And so not too much acquisitions, though I will say, we've talked about it a little bit. This market, the front office tech market, has become increasingly fragmented. I do foresee some consolidation within this market over the next couple of years. It almost has to. And I don't know if we'll be at the forefront of that. In fact, I don't believe we will, but I do think that some things are going to need to get merged together.
What about, I always like to touch on just FP&A, some of the lessons that you've taken from past experiences within the FP&A arena. Perhaps you have applied here or maybe not. I don't know. But can you tell us something about your mindset when it comes to FP&A? How you deploy your people, where you use them, where you don't?
I obviously love FP&A, and that's I probably over rotate towards FP&A on my own team because I'm comfortable with it. I know that what they're trying to deliver. The thing I tell my FP&A team all the time is I expect you to be an extension of the businesses that you support. I want you in the weekly stand-ups for those leadership teams. I want you talking to the various members of the team like you are a member of that organization so that you can help guide them through really strategically how to think about the business. And where FP&A becomes so important, and for anybody who's thinking about a career in FP&A, is that is the organization that stitches the company back together. If the product management team is going down one road while the sales team is going down another, the company's not going to work. And FP&A is the place where that needs to come together, where we say, the sales team wants to start really growing in EMEA, and the product team hasn't even thought about a localization of the product. Like, that has to come back together right at that point. Otherwise, it's at the CEO, which is not the right place for these things to come back together. And so the best FP&A team members that I have worked with really think like that. They think like a marketer. They think like a product person who has a financial background. And it's just what I try to teach everybody. And then the communication aspect. I mean, I said it on the front end of this call, and I'll come back to it, is the storytelling side is so important, because at some point we're going to have to go to the board and say, we need 20 more account executives next year. Yeah. And they're going to say, why? And that if it's just you respond with, well, we need sales capacity, that's not the answer. The answer is, we want to grow our enterprise business, and to really do that, we're going to have ramp times. We're going to meet them with this amount of demand. We're going to think about the business and where those teams need to go. We have this many accounts that they can go work. If you're not able to do all of that, you've really lost the narrative with the company. And look, I think good FP&A teams can do that. I think I have one of those teams right now. I think we've got one of the better FP&A teams in SaaS software and software in general. But those are the learnings. And look, I've been through ups and downs at Apptio. There was a point when there was 3 of us in finance. When we were a public company, we had just dealt with some people who were leaving. We were doing filings and acquisitions and all of that. And so, like, a core team of good FP&A people can really give leverage to the business. No, I wouldn't want to relive that. That was exhausting times, but you learn a lot that way. And those are the things that I take away and try to instill in my team.
All right. Well, we are up to what we like to refer to as our finance strategic moment question. This is where we ask you to look back in time and share with us just one moment. You've had many of these. Maybe even today you've had a few, but a moment of strategic insight that you experienced, because as a finance executive, you could see things. You could look into the business. Anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
I reflect a lot on this last year since I've been back at Outreach. The company's been through a lot of changes through the years, but we really planned the business correctly this year. And it is amazing how that impacted the overall morale of the company. When you see green numbers at every quarterly all hands, and you're able to go there and say, we said we were going to do this, and we actually did better. And it's amazing how that little bit of, hey, things are going the right direction, just builds the company and builds the morale, gets people believing in themselves. And it's so funny that it all comes back to a finance team sitting in a corner trying to put together a plan for the year, and coming out and nailing that plan and exceeding it in a lot of ways. It's the small things. It's the day-to-day. It's just the core of what a finance team does, but it's amazing the impact on the overall company. I love going to talk to other teams within the company. Like, I talk to our SMB sales team and help them understand why we might be making decisions that we're making as a company, whether that's, changing the way we go to market, and helping them understand the financials that sit behind that, why it's company building. You don't come to an outreach unless you're curious about building a company. We're 750 employees and growing. Like, the one biggest benefit of being at a company like that is you get access to the CFO. If you have questions, you can ask them. And I love going and doing that and helping people understand the broader business strategy, because that helps tie everything back together. Why we're saying the things that we're saying as a company, and ultimately, like I said, that has to come back to financials. It needs to grow the top line or improve the bottom line. And as people understand that, whether it's a short-term decision or trying to play the long game, I love going and doing that. So, we talked to, this is fairly public, we've sort of upped the minimum deal size that we want a company to come in at. And honestly, a lot of that has to do with the tool itself. It just doesn't work great anymore for a company that's one or two people. And trying to get our SMB sales team to understand, or our commercial sales team to understand why we would do something like that, because they're looking at it saying, well, this is pretty easy business. It comes inbound. We just sign them up. And I have to respond with, well, they don't stay around because the tool's too hard. They create a lot of support tickets. We're just not designed for that. It's outside of our ICP, and getting them to understand that and having those light bulb moments really helps them understand the overall strategy of the company.
Again, you arrived in February of 2025 in the CFO office, that is. Wondering, was there a particular metric that you believe you have raised the profile of?
For sure. There's two things that I think that come to mind as I think about that. So we talk a lot about our gross retention, and everybody talks about gross retention, but actually understanding the underlying mechanics of our gross retention and helping people understand why we might focus on a different part of the business, really getting behind why that's important and why we need to retain customers and why we need to keep them happy and why certain parts of our business retain way better than other parts of our business. And that's where we need to focus. We need to make sure we're focused on the right customers and honestly reduce our focus on the customers that don't make as much sense for us. So that's one. And the other is really thinking about our AI revenue. That's a big, important metric for the company. And so we set it as a top line goal for the company, but not necessarily incented the sales team to think about that as well. And so you can get this broken situation where the sales team is hitting their numbers, but the company's dissatisfied with the overall, because there's a component piece of that. And so making sure that the sales team and the overall company stay aligned, and that really for us is AI revenue, is that part of our business needs to grow and needs to be a disproportionate part of our growth. And that's the main focus of the company right now, frankly.
Drew, we're going to jump to our mentoring round where we'll ask you to look back again. Again, you almost have a solid year under your belt in the CFO office. We're wondering, again, you had observed CFOs for years. You worked closely for them for years. But there had to be something that surprised you when you finally stepped into the office, the seat, and all the responsibilities were there. I mean, if you had to write the first 100 days book over, if you, what didn't it tell you? Tell us something.
So I kind of knew this, but something is always on fire, and I didn't quite appreciate that. And, I'm a finance guy. I came up through finance, FP&A, banking. And so when you really take over the controllership of the company, there's so many things within the controllership that are mostly downside only type of jobs. Payroll is the perfect example. You don't pay attention to the fact that your pay is correct every single time. But the reality is there's a lot of work that goes on behind that to ensure that that is correct. And so it's amazing how much time you spend working through like little details. I was the CFO at Extensive in my little stint between terms at Outreach, and I'd spent an hour on the phone with the revenue department of the state of Minnesota, and who would have ever thought I would have to do that in my career? And it's those type of things that you have to come in and you have to have a positive attitude about, because otherwise they're just crushing. And they're across the board. There's always people coming and going. There's a huge portion of my job is really human resources. It's motivating people, hiring the right people, developing the right people, making sure I have succession plans in place throughout the organization. Do I have career ladders set up for people to keep them moving up? And you do all this work in finance, and it turns out that the best training ground for all of that work was I was a middle school track coach in college, and I kind of learned how to manage kids there. And a lot of that learnings that came into how I think about that part of management as a CFO.
Well, you did mention extensive, which was, again, I have to believe you were at Outreach nearly 4 years, and you step into the CFO role at extensive. And then one day there's a phone call. It's Outreach.
That's what happened.
Is that what happened? Oh, wow.
Precisely. I got a call from our head of HR, who I had been friends with for a long time, asking if I had any interest in coming back. And honestly, transparently, I told her probably not when I first talked to her. I was in a good role. I liked the exec team, and the Extensive has a good upside as a company. And she said, okay, but you need to meet Abhijit, who has taken over as our CEO. I was close with Manny, who was our founder. I had known he was moving on to the board, and I didn't know at that point that Abhijit was taking over. He had been running product. He and I didn't overlap. And I will tell you, his vision of where the company needed to go couldn't have aligned more with mine. Really focused on agentic AI and leveraging the data asset that Outreach has. And it just sparked my attention of, I do enjoy this space. I did enjoy my time at this company. And that's what really drove me to come back. And so you're right. It started with a phone call, and, a few months later, I was back in the seat as CFO.
Wow. Great story for us. Thank you. Hey, before we go, we always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side. Is there something, and you've put in some time there, so maybe your colleagues know everything about you, but is there something most people don't know about you? Something, an interesting chapter from your past, an interest that you have, anything?
Oh, that's funny. I bet you people don't realize I love to read, and I probably read, dozens of books a year, and trying to just make myself better and continue to evolve. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's fun on this.
Well, that's it. I have to ask you the book question then. I was going to skip it, but now I'm going to ask you, is there, thinking about a book or a resource that's influenced your thinking along the way, what comes to mind quickly?
Without a doubt, Ben Horowitz's book, Hard Thing About Hard Things. So Andreessen Horowitz was an investor at Apptio, so we all got this book as it came out. Wow. It is just the best distillation of how to think about management that I've read. And it definitely influenced the way, it goes down to how I think about doing my one-on-ones with people. There's just so many things like that. So nothing has influenced me quite like that.
Excellent choice for us. Thank you. We're up to our final question. We're going to ask you to look forward finally. What we want to know are your priorities as a CFO of Outreach for the coming 12 months. What are those priorities?
Yeah, no, it's really to support the growth of the business however we can. And that growth, like I said, is coming from our AI agents. And I want to make sure that everything is designed. We have to make sure that growth remains efficient, and that's where the finance team comes in. But it really is to support the overall business.
All right. Well, Drew Laxton, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it.